we have one item pending. We're going to wrap up and continue our conversations from last month. Just to make sure I budget time correctly, do we have members of the public here to speak? Okay, just one. All right, so we'll hear from staff first, and then we'll have some time for public comment.
So I think Madam Chair, you nailed it. We've got a couple of items, we have Part A and a Part B here to deal with today about citizen-initiated street closings and the petitions and how we can bring those to council to take action. As you know, right now it's very difficult for some of those things if they don't fully meet the criteria. So we're going to do first part. We have a couple of options for you to consider about the process itself. And then we have two specific use cases for you to consider today, and we're looking for some direction on that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kenneth Ritchie from Transportation, and he'll lead us through the conversation.
Good afternoon, council members. Kenneth Ritchie with Transportation. This is a follow-up from our April T&T, where we went through some more extensive background on the street closure process, current city process. We went into some details on those two specific cases. Based off the conversation we had in April, we have done some follow-up, and that this is responsive to that, so we'll kind of walk through that. Certainly, any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. So we'll start Part A, as it's broken out on the agenda, is looking at the process, and then with Part B, we'll go through the two specific cases, Willow Street and Woodside Drive. So with the process, this is an overview of the process as it exists today. The first step with the petition application, today, it does require, based off the language on the petition, all signatures of all interested and abutting property owners. It is because ultimately there is interest with the way the statute would split the right-of-way 50-50. We would require all those signatures. Upon that, having that full completed application, we would go through a technical review that includes both internal city staff as well as our external partners, especially from our private utilities. And upon completion of that, if staff supported it, that petition would be presented to the council with a resolution of intent to close the right-of-way through the consent agenda. With the adoption of that resolution, that would also set the public hearing. We would go through an extensive public notification process consistent with state law that would then lead us to the public hearing. Upon completion of the public hearing and the council finding it in not contrary to the public interest, with the adoption of the resolution ordering the closure, the final step would be, today would be a plat that closes that right-of-way. It would go 50-50 both ways, and that right-of-way would officially be closed and no longer public space. Conversations certainly that these two cases have started to highlight is there's a gap there as it relates to, okay, if there are cases that staff doesn't support moving forward, how do those come before the council for consideration? So with the conversation from April, staff went back and looked at the process, and we've got two considerations here. Consideration A would really kind of follow the process that we have today. So staff supported or not, both would show up on the consent agenda. And with that, for cases that staff did not support, there could be a recommendation to refer it to this committee for further consideration. Or certainly, depending on the desire of the body, the petition could be denied in total through that action as well. But this would ensure all petitions have their consideration by the elected body, and then in terms of how they move forward from there would be at the discretion of the council. Consideration B would be a slight modification to that process. Staff supported would continue through the consent. Those that staff did not support could come forward as a report of the manager with the background information, and council could then direct staff how to proceed with the application from that standpoint. So really looking at two slightly different iterations of how those cases that we have that staff would find or that they do not support could end up in front of the body for consideration. So with that, I will pause for a minute. I'll go back to the last slide so you've got it for information if there's any questions regarding the process.
I think out of these two options, the one that resonates a bit more for me is having the blurb in the consent recommend that they come to Transportation and Transit. I fear, not that we all read the report of the manager thoroughly and remember everything that's in it, also sometimes maybe we read it a week late or 2 weeks late, and
Just,
Because
yeah. I was
So
gonna-
that's
Not
during
the-
the city council meeting.
Talking about the part of
When
the
it's report
agenda where
on the
Marshall
agenda.
gives us
oh,
items.
not the Friday, not the
Yeah.
Friday.
No, not the Friday report.
Yeah, my apologies.
Sorry,
Not,
okay.
not the weekly manager's update, but the report of the city manager on our standard council agenda.
Got it, okay. Well, with that updated information, then I changed my opinion. I think it would be nice for it to have like like, be called out to the council, like, hello, make a decision about this rather than passing through, but,
Does
okay.
everybody else think? I can make a motion.
Yeah, I like that idea too. Send it to the whole council,
I like B.
anywhere where there's not support or something's a conflict, and let the council make the decision. And the council can send it to a committee or can vote it down or whatever. But I think that should be the best next step.
I move to recommend B.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you. So next, we will go through the two cases that were discussed in further detail back in April. So we'll start with Willow Street. And just a kind of quick recap on this one, the incomplete application was submitted in December of 2024. It lacked the signatures of all the adjacent abutting and interested property owners. Both the petitioner and the neighbor have addressed the council in different forums during the process. These are just a couple pictures of the existing right-of-way today. Based off direction from the April T&T, staff has completed a technical review. The one identification that came from that is there is overhead power lines that run along the frontage of the property, so Duke would request a 30-foot wide easement that's centered on the poles and on the overhead lines. Likely it would be somewhere around 15 feet that would be encumbered on the actual property. If it's directed to move forward, we could request an appraisal and bring that data point forward when we bring the case forward. And as a reminder, the petition does still lack the signatures that would deem it a complete application per our current requirements. And so we can stop with that one if you'd like to consider that, or we can go through both cases and then talk through them.
Sir, you're here to speak on this case, the Willow Street case?
It's more so Hunter Winstead, Morningstar Law Group. It's more related to the Woodside, the North Hills case. It's not particularly related to either case. It's more so a procedural question. So whenever the committee thinks it's appropriate.
Got it, okay, let's go through all the content and we'll give
Okay.
you a chance to speak before we do the
Absolutely. So the next case is Woodside Drive. This is an existing 60-foot public right-of-way. This equates to about a quarter acre of property. Application was submitted in 2023. The petitioner desired to acquire the right-of-way to deliver subdivision and high-end homes. An updated appraisal was obtained to the value of $256,000. Per the staff review, it was deemed inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and prior council approvals. These are just some pictures of the right-of-way today. Per council direction, we have had correspondence with the petitioner since then as it relates to the appraisal. We shared that updated appraisal value with them. On May 7th, the petitioner responded, essentially offering compensation in the amount of $175,000 in consideration of the public interest that would be lost from the closure of this right-of-way. And so with the two cases, again, can be acted on individually or together. And the direction could be to bring forward the resolution and all necessary background information for the full council to consider. Or it could be direction to discontinue one or both of the petitions. And certainly happy to take any questions.
What was the appraisal value though for it?
The appraisal value was $256,000.
256, and they offered 175.
Yeah, well, I know we have someone here to speak. I'll just add, normally we're not the body that's in the business of negotiating contracts. So I'm not sure what sort of an amounts, and so I'm not sure what direction you want. I will just say, speaking freely, we're going through this process outside of our normal process because there was a request made, and I think it's insincere that they would then offer substantially less than the appraised value. I mean, if they want to make this, if we're going to jump through hoops to make this happen for them, I feel like they need to be meeting us in good faith, and to me, it does not feel that way. I have people raising their hands, and now Brandon's talking, but what I would be inclined to move this forward for fair compensation. I just don't, if the appraised value is 256 and they offered 175, that doesn't seem fair.
So I would ask Mr. Ritchie to confirm the appraisal was the full cross-section of the street, not just the half interest that
That
by
is correct.
statute
The
would go
appraisal was
to
based
the
off
petitioner.
of the full cross-section of the right-of-way.
And this is half of that?
They're going to divide it like right in half, so they're only getting back half of the land.
Oh, all right, so then they've offered more than.
Right, unless there was concurrence with the two adjacent owners, that it would all go to one property owner under the statutory formulas down the center.
Take it all back for whoever's listening.
But I do think it calls an important question, because if we divide it down the middle and one petitioner is paying us fair market value for their half and the other person who has not petitioned us is getting their land for free, I think that calls an interesting question of fairness. I mean, we could argue they're the ones that asked, so they're the ones that have to pay, and this other person who was fine with the right-of-way, they get their land for free. But I just think it's something to consider.
What's the legal, how's that?
There really is not a legal issue with that so much as, I think you're right, you identified that it could lead to outcomes that are less favorable for the non-petitioner who, to my knowledge, hasn't been engaged in the case at all. I think one thing we could do if the committee desired is to work with the petitioner to possibly amend their petition so that the effect is, at the end of the day, it only closes the one half adjacent to their property, and then it leaves the other half as right-of-way that the adjacent owner at some point, if the property redevelops, could seek to petition to close themselves in the future.
I like that.
I like that plan, or, and I don't want to make this too complicated, could we make it a requirement that the petitioner has to be requesting the entirety of the right-of-way?
There would have to be concurrence from the property owner across the street.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so then I think it would make sense then that we would just convey the portion they're purchasing and the rest the city retains ownership.
And we can work with the petitioner on amending their application to that effect.
I think, yeah, some
Does that work?
comments.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear from members of the public, and then we'll give final action on all of these. Sir, we'll give you 3 minutes, and if you'll just state your name, too.
Perfect. Good afternoon, council members. Hunter Winstead, Morningstar Law Group. I'm here because we have a case that it falls similarly in line to these two cases. It's one where I don't think we've received a determination as to whether it's non-conforming or not, or whether it's in the public interest. But we're in talks with staff about compensation. So my question is really about compensation, what the procedures are for that. I've been watching a few of the committee meetings over the past few months, and it seems like compensation only comes into the equation when there's non-conforming applications. I may be wrong, but that's really the question I have. And I know there's some confusion amongst our clients and the public generally of if we're going to petition, do we need to be prepared in every case to offer some sort of compensation, or is it only in these cases where there's a determination that it's not in the public interest and then compensation comes in the question? So that's just the question I have, so I can educate my clients and the public on that.
I was just going to add in, Assistant City Manager Mork may jump in. It was my understanding that we were adding compensation to just sort of a list of options that could, like if it doesn't check any other box, then the last fall would be like, if we have no use for it, it doesn't check any other box, if you want to pay for it, fine. But
Correct. Again, we're going to come back to this idea that it's not detrimental to the public interest. So if there's something that, for example, you're going to have an item on your next agenda where there's a street closure of a cul-de-sac that is part of a bigger consolidation and a bigger project, they'll potentially, you would deem that there's a better public interest because we may get more housing units, more affordable housing units, more connected street grid, any host of additional benefits that would be there. Compensation is just, again, one of those, something that you could consider as part of the potential public benefit.
so basically, if you can't prove any other public benefit, we would potentially consider receiving fair market value compensation as the public benefit.
I think we would say that could be considered not detrimental to the public interest and in the public interest to have something that would assist with for a future project.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think, to your point, it does raise a question of the petitioner offering fair market value for the entire parcel, right, when they're only receiving half of it. And the idea about splitting it in half, too, it just popped into my mind the question of, well, when the neighbor then goes to close that street, the presumption would be to split it in half again, right? And they would need the consent of the original petitioner. So there's all these kind of interesting legal questions. I think that's very helpful, though, that clarification. Sounds like it's not a necessity for every single application. It's more so a possibility of a way to present in the public interest for cases that are not in the public interest. Just make sure to restate, I think, what I heard.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think, just for some context, I think the committee was told this at the last meeting. I think this is a relatively new development for city staff, that street closure applications are coming in for anything that could just add significant value to an adjacent lot. Too, it could create a fully buildable lot on its own. I think in the past, when you've seen these, particularly partial ones, it's been slivers that it was in the city's best interest to straighten a street alignment, or there was an inefficient connection that was being replaced by another connection on the same development plan. So this is a relatively new development, and among the factors that staff is taking into account as they start building the policy, and these two just are the ones triggering the change in the policy, is also looking at equitable factors such as, is the property owner who would receive the benefit from the closure the original dedicator of the property interest? Because if they dedicated as part of a city development plan 30 years ago, and the successor property, and I think this might be the case for Clover Lane, if the successor owner is in the chain of title from that street dedication and essentially can tie their title back to including what was dedicated as the street to the city, I think equity would suggest that they not have to pay for something that they gave the city for free. So those are factors that city is looking at as they build the process.
Very helpful. Sorry.
So for me, regardless, if we decide to move forward, I just ask staff to track this for like a year or so and then bring it back to council, so we can have some data in case we need to make some adjustments depending on whatever decision we make, coming out of here into the full council. Because right now, whatever decision we make, we're making it with limited information, but it's not anyone's fault that it's limited. It's new. And so I think in a year's time, this should be revisited.
Yeah. And I would add, and I know Kenneth and his team are looking into this, I think as this dynamic has changed, one of the flaws that's emerged in the current process is the question isn't really asked during the process, possibly even through the public hearing of, well, what's your intention with the property? What are you doing with the property? Because if you're looking at the overall analysis of in the public interest, is there benefit to the public coming from the closure of the right-of-way, part of that's going to be looking at, well, what's coming out of it.
Folks, I have one final question that's kind of related to the policy considerations. Is there some stated policy somewhere other than from the comp plan, which is policy 2.7, that staff's looking at? I'm just thinking of ways that is there stated like policy document anywhere of what's considered in the public interest, or is it more so just a judgment call, political question?
I think right now it's generally looking at the comp plan, looking at consistency with prior council actions, looking at guiding documents that the council has adopted for, it could be small area plans and
Right.
planning documents, it could be the strategic plan and just looking at city policy priorities. I would have to defer to staff as to what else they're considering right now.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And sir, I saw you raising your hand in the back. I hadn't seen your hand originally. Are you hoping to speak?
It would be great if I could, please. I'm the owner of Dartmouth Road, adjacent to the Woodside Drive.
Okay, understood. Come on up and let us know your name, and you can have 3 minutes as well.
I'm Justin Mason. I'm, again, owner of Dartmouth Road, Woodside Drive. I petitioned for that, spoken to a few of you, but I wanted to bring up, just to add to what Kenneth shared, the 175, I made that offer in light of what we talked about in the last meeting, that there are other things that are also compensatable as public benefit, like reduced liability cost for closing the right-of-way, tax savings for the new lot, all of those things. And so I'd factored that in on my own analysis. And the message I'd shared was, I'm open to what council decides. So the 175 was my analysis, but it would be based off of your own judgment. I thought there was going to be some analysis on that on your end. So
The question being called here in this meeting is sort of just the question of whether your case will move forward to a public hearing. So I think some, further write-up and presentation might be made at the time of
Okay.
public hearing if we move forward. You're basically stuck at step one, and right now we're deciding if you get to go forward through the rest of the steps before, to get to a decision, if that makes sense and doesn't sound too bureaucratic.
Just wanted to clarify, I wasn't being unfair, I didn't come up with some lower offer.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a reason why they don't put us in charge of negotiating.
All right, thank you.
Nor do I want to, so.
There, well, we appreciate your comments there. And anyone else? All right, so we'll bring it back to the table. Sounds like on the first part, on the procedural part, we've given you enough direction, okay? And so then we just have to decide if we're gonna send these two edge cases forward to like continue through their process and ultimately make it to a public hearing. So we wanna talk about Willow Street first.
So, question for our staff. Based upon the direction we gave prior, if something's kind of non-conforming, the fact that these have already come to council, will we say that box is already checked if we vote to move these forward? Or will they have to come back after y'all do some due diligence?
If I understand the question, we would bring these forward on an agenda, probably under consent to say, we'd bring these forward on a special item.
Special item.
And say, you've heard these in committee, you'll refer them out. We'll say, we've heard these in committee. We'll ask you to set the public hearing at the special item, and then we would bring them forward as we normally would.
Okay.
So if I understand the question correctly.
Yeah, I think what would happen is at the June 3rd meeting, the committee report would report out that just regardless, whatever the direction is taken on each of these two cases, that direction was given to staff to either end one of them, move one forward, and if the decision is to move them forward, then the earliest it would appear on consent agenda
17.
would be the second meeting in June, and that would be to adopt the initial resolution stating that the council finds that the closure is in the public interest and intends to close the street, and that would set up the public hearing for what would be the first meeting in August, because you don't have a meeting that meets the
Perfect.
statutory requirements in July.
Okay.
And sorry, not to labor on about it. Kenneth, can you go back to that, one of the really early slides where it shows the process?
With this one or the?
No, sorry, this one, yeah. So I thought when we were in committee last month, these are both stuck there, right? And so they still have to go through this petition review, like, y'all still have to kind of run it through the machine?
So we've done the technical analysis on both of them, obviously,
Okay.
with differing areas that created that nonconformance. And so ultimately, based off the direction, we would bring those forward with the details, with a resolution of intent that council could choose to adopt and set the public hearing.
Got it, okay.
I think Willow Street, they may not be able to bring back on that timetable if they have to get an appraisal, just because of the time it would take for that. I think they have all of those pieces in place for Mr. Mason's application.
Well, I'll start with Woodside, and I would move to recommend that we push that one forward to the hearing.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then Willow Street.
Willow Street's the one where the folks came last time, and I believe we thought it would be beneficial to get that to a hearing as well, so we can get everybody's
Yeah, so we
facts.
can-
And so just because we push it forward doesn't mean we're going to do it, but it would
That's right.
give them and the other folks the opportunity to state their case.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's the right forum for all parties involved to make their case, and then for us to make a judgment on whether it's in the public interest. So, yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, I move that we recommend moving that one to the hearing stage too.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
And I would just ask, I think, I was thinking through the process that Mr. Moore was suggesting that these would take, since these individual applications have not yet hit the council table, I would suggest that following the committee report, they would just be placed on consent agenda like normal through the process that Mr. Ritchie has described, and not necessarily come as a special item, because individually, those applications haven't made it to the table yet.
We can do that.
Okay.
Either way, they're going to go forward to a hearing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Whatever's technically sound.
Right, they would go forward to consideration of that initial resolution and setting the hearing.
Great. Sounds good. All right. Well, this item is wrapped, and we'll report it out of committee at our June 3rd meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.